The morning light filtered through the massive viewing windows of New Seoul Station's Galactic Navigation Academy. Lee Hana sat quietly in the back row of Classroom 7, her worn leather notebook resting on the smooth metal desk. Around her, students from across the galaxy chatted in dozens of different languages, their advanced devices humming with energy. Hana watched as her classmates prepared for another day of learning. The Altarians glowed softly blue as they communicated through light patterns. The Centaurians towered over everyone else, their crystal-like skin reflecting the classroom's bright lights. Near the front, 3 Andromedan students floated slightly above their chairs, their tentacles dancing over holographic displays that appeared in the air. She felt very small among them all. The classroom door slid open with a soft whoosh. Commander Vextal entered, his long Altarian form moving with practiced grace. His blue skin pulsed gently as he surveyed the room. Students quickly took their seats and powered down their personal devices. "Good morning, future navigators," Commander Vextal said, his voice carrying easily through the large room. "Today we begin your final practical examination." Excited whispers filled the space. This was what they had all been waiting for. The final exam would determine who graduated as certified galactic navigators and who would need another year of study. Commander Vextal activated the room's main display. A 3-dimensional map appeared, showing a dark region of space filled with swirling clouds and dangerous-looking energy patterns. "The Void Nebula," he announced, "one of the most challenging navigation zones in this sector of the galaxy. Ships have been lost there for centuries. Your task is simple in concept, but difficult in execution. You must create a complete navigational map of this region." A Centaurian student named Crix raised one of his 4 arms. His voice boomed across the room when he spoke. "Commander, will we have access to military-grade scanning equipment?" "You may use any tools available to students at this academy," Vextal replied. "Standard quantum sensors, gravitational detection arrays, and AI-assisted mapping software are all at your disposal in the equipment bay." Hana felt her stomach tighten. She had used the standard equipment before, but she was not very good with the complex machines. Her grades in technical navigation had been barely passing. "You have 3 weeks to complete this assignment," the commander continued. "Your maps will be evaluated for accuracy, detail, and practical usefulness. Remember, a navigator's map might one day mean the difference between life and death for thousands of travelers." As the students began to leave the classroom, Hana remained in her seat. She pulled out her old notebook and stared at its yellowed pages. Her grandfather, Kim Jun, had given it to her before she left Earth. It had belonged to his father, who had been a ship captain on Earth's oceans long ago. "Hana, are you coming?" She looked up to see Park Minho standing beside her desk. He was the only other human in their class, and her closest friend at the academy. His kind face showed concern. "Yes, I'm coming," she said, closing the notebook and gathering her things. They walked together toward the equipment bay, where other students were already examining the advanced scanning devices. The machines were impressive, with smooth surfaces covered in blinking lights and holographic displays. "Look at that gravitational wave detector," Minho said, his eyes wide. "It can map space-time distortions from 1,000 light-years away." Hana nodded, but her attention was drawn to a simple observation deck nearby. Through its clear walls, she could see the stars beyond the station. Something about direct observation had always appealed to her more than looking at computer screens. "The humans want to look at the pretty stars," came a mocking voice behind them. They turned to see Crix approaching with 2 of his Centaurian friends. At nearly 3 meters tall, they cast long shadows over the 2 humans. "We're just deciding which equipment to use," Minho said, trying to sound confident. "Equipment?" Crix laughed, a sound like crystals chiming. "You'll need more than equipment. You'll need intelligence. This isn't like mapping your little Earth oceans." Hana felt heat rise in her cheeks, but said nothing. She had learned that arguing with Crix only made things worse. Over the next few days, students claimed time slots with various pieces of equipment. The Andromedan students worked with quantum sensors that could detect subatomic particles across vast distances. The Altarian students used devices that measured light spectrum changes to map stellar formations. Even the younger students from lesser-known species had access to technology that surpassed anything humans had invented. Hana found herself spending most of her time in the observation deck. She would sit for hours watching the distant nebula through the Academy's powerful telescopes. She made careful notes in her grandfather's notebook, sketching what she saw and writing down her thoughts in simple pencil. "What are you doing?" Minho asked one evening, finding her still at the observation deck long after classes had ended. "Watching," Hana said simply. "My grandfather taught me that you have to really see something before you can understand it." "But, Hana, we're competing against students who have technology that can scan through solid matter and detect gravity waves. Your grandfather's methods were for sailing Earth's oceans, not navigating space." Hana looked at her friend's worried face. She understood his concern. "I know it seems strange, but there are patterns in the nebula. The way the gas moves, how the light bends around certain areas. I can see things that the machines might miss." Minho sat down beside her. "What kind of things?" She opened her notebook and showed him her sketches. The pages were filled with careful drawings of swirling patterns, areas marked as calm zones, and paths she had labeled safe channels. Her handwriting was neat and precise, with measurements and observations written in the margins. "See this area here?" She pointed to a section of her drawing. "The gas moves differently there. It's like there's something underneath that the instruments can't detect. And these lines I've marked show where the stellar winds create natural corridors." Minho studied the pages with growing amazement. The drawings were incredibly detailed, showing patterns and formations that would have taken sophisticated computer analysis to detect. Yet Hana had created them with just her eyes and a pencil. "This is remarkable work," he said. "But will the commander understand it? Will he accept a hand-drawn map when everyone else is using holographic displays and digital analysis?" Before Hana could answer, laughter echoed from across the equipment bay. Crix and several other students were looking in their direction. "The human is drawing pictures," Crix announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Perhaps she thinks this is an art class instead of navigation training." More students gathered around, curious about the commotion. One of the Andromedan students floated over to examine Hana's notebook. "Fascinating," the Andromedan said in its translated voice. "Primitive markings on processed plant material. Is this how humans still record information?" "It's traditional Earth cartography," Hana said, quietly, her face burning with embarrassment. "Traditional?" Crix's voice dripped with amusement. "You mean ancient, obsolete? How do you expect to compete with quantum sensors using Stone Age tools?" Even some of the normally polite Altarian students began to glow brighter with what Hana recognized as their equivalent of laughter. Word spread quickly through the academy about the human who was trying to map space with paper and pencil. Commander Vextal heard about the situation and approached Hana's table in the observation deck the next day. He studied her notebook with professional interest, his blue skin pulsing thoughtfully. "Miss Lee," he said carefully, "I admire your traditional approach. However, this is an advanced navigation course. The Void Nebula is one of the most dangerous regions in known space. Lives depend on accurate mapping." "I understand, Commander," Hana replied. "But I believe my methods can produce accurate results." Vextal's skin dimmed slightly, which Hana had learned indicated doubt or concern among his species. "I will not prevent you from using any legal methods," he said finally. "But I encourage you to consider supplementing your work with more conventional techniques." As news of Hana's approach spread throughout the academy, she became something of a curiosity. Students would walk by the observation deck just to see the human with her primitive notebook. Some whispered that she had lost her mind under the pressure of the final exam. Others suggested that humans simply weren't advanced enough for galactic navigation training. Through it all, Hannah continued her patient observations. She filled page after page with careful sketches, measurements, and notes. She marked areas where the nebula's gases created natural shelters from cosmic radiation. She identified channels where gravitational forces from nearby stars created safe passage routes. Most importantly, she began to see patterns that revealed the nebula's hidden structure. But as the 3-week deadline approached, doubt began to creep into her mind. Around her, classmates prepared presentations with stunning holographic displays, computer-generated models, and data analysis that would have impressed professional navigators. Her simple hand-drawn map seemed pathetic by comparison. The night before presentations were due, Minho found her still working in the observation deck. "You should get some sleep," he said gently. "Almost finished," Hannah replied, adding final details to a section of her map that showed what she called stellar wind corridors. "Are you sure about this?" Minho asked. "It's not too late to use some of the standard equipment. I could help. You create a basic computer model." Hannah looked at her friend's concerned face, then at her notebook filled with 3 weeks of careful observations. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory, telling her stories of navigating Earth's oceans by reading wind patterns and water currents. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "This is right. I can feel it." The next morning would bring presentations, and with them, the judgment of her peers and instructors on whether ancient human wisdom had any place among the stars. The presentation hall buzzed with nervous energy as students prepared to show their work. Commander Vextal stood at the front of the room, his blue skin glowing steadily as he reviewed the day's schedule. Behind him, a massive holographic display waited to showcase each student's navigational map of the Void Nebula. Hannah sat in the back row, clutching her leather notebook. Around her, classmates made final adjustments to their digital presentations. The Andromedan students floated near expensive quantum processors, their tentacles dancing over controls that made soft beeping sounds. The Centaurians had gathered around a military-grade scanner that hummed with power. "We will begin with presentations in alphabetical order by species," Commander Vextal announced. "Altarian students first." 3 Altarian students took turns displaying their work. Each presentation was impressive, with detailed 3-dimensional maps that rotated slowly in the air. The maps showed precise measurements of gas density, gravitational fields, and radiation levels throughout the nebula. Their data had been collected using advanced light spectrum analyzers that could detect changes invisible to most species. The first Altarian student, Ziltar, explained her methodology with confidence. "Using wavelength analysis across 17 different light frequencies, I was able to map the nebula's internal structure with accuracy down to 0.001%. Commander Vextal nodded approvingly. The other students murmured their admiration for the precise holographic display that showed every detail of the nebula in perfect digital clarity. Next came the Andromedan presentations. The 3 floating students had worked together to create what they called a quantum-accurate navigational matrix. Their map was even more complex, showing not just the current state of the nebula, but predictions of how it would change over the next 100 years. By analyzing subatomic particle movements, the lead Andromedan explained through its translator device, "We have created a 4-dimensional map that accounts for temporal fluctuations in the nebula's structure." The presentation was stunning. The holographic nebula shifted and changed before their eyes, showing how stellar winds and gravitational forces would alter safe passage routes over time. Several students gasped in amazement at the sophisticated display. Then came Crix's turn. The tall Centaurian stood proudly beside a presentation that dwarfed all the others. His holographic display filled half the room, showing the nebula in incredible detail. Every gas cloud, every electromagnetic field, every gravitational anomaly was mapped with military precision. "I used Centaurian Imperial Fleet scanning technology," Crix announced, his crystal skin gleaming with pride. "This equipment costs more than most planets spend on defense. It can detect gravitational variations down to the molecular level." The map was breathtakingly beautiful and incredibly detailed. It showed safe routes marked in bright green, danger zones in red, and areas of uncertainty in yellow. The display included real-time data feeds, emergency beacon locations, and even suggested speeds for different types of spacecraft. Commander Vextal studied the presentation carefully. "Impressive work, Cadet Crix. The level of detail is exceptional." Crix smiled, showing teeth that sparkled like diamonds. "Thank you, Commander. I believe this represents the most accurate map of the Void Nebula ever created by a student." Other students nodded in agreement. The presentation was clearly the work of someone who would become a master navigator. Several classmates were already congratulating Crix on what seemed like certain victory. As more students presented their work, a pattern emerged. Each used increasingly sophisticated technology to scan and map the nebula. The Rigelian students used gravity wave detectors. The Vegan delegation employed quantum entanglement sensors. Even students from smaller, less advanced civilizations had access to equipment that produced detailed digital maps far beyond anything humans could create. Finally, Commander Vextal called the last name on his list. "Lihanna, please present your work." The room fell silent. Students turned to watch as Hannah walked slowly to the front of the presentation area. She carried only her old leather notebook, looking tiny beside the massive holographic display system. Whispers began immediately. "Where's her equipment? What's she going to show us?" "This should be entertaining." Hannah opened her notebook and carefully removed several hand-drawn pages. She placed them on the document projector, an old device used for displaying flat materials. The image of her first map appeared on the main screen, drawn in simple pencil on yellowed paper. The room erupted in barely controlled laughter. Her map showed the nebula as a collection of swirling patterns and carefully drawn lines. Where other students had precise digital measurements, Hannah had neat handwriting marking distances and directions. Where others showed complex three-dimensional structures, she had simple drawings with detailed notes written in the margins. "Is this a joke?" One student whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Crix's voice boomed across the room. "Commander, surely you cannot accept this as serious academic work. Those are crayon drawings." "They're pencil drawings," Hannah said quietly, her face red with embarrassment. "And they represent 3 weeks of careful observation and measurement." She placed her second page on the projector. This one showed what she called stellar wind corridors, paths through the nebula marked with arrows and notes about safe passage. The drawing was incredibly detailed, showing patterns and flows that seemed to dance across the page. "I observed the nebula for over 60 hours, Hannah explained, her voice growing stronger despite her nervousness. "I watched how the gases move, how light bends around different areas, and how the gravitational fields create natural channels." She pointed to a section of her map marked with tiny dots and careful shading. "This area here shows what I call safe harbors. The gas is calmer there, protected from the strongest stellar winds by these formations." Her finger traced along hand-drawn lines that curved through the nebula like a river through mountains. A few students leaned forward with genuine curiosity, but most continued to whisper and chuckle among themselves. Hannah placed her final page on the projector. This was her most detailed work, showing the entire nebula with paths marked in different colors of ink. Red lines marked dangerous areas she labeled gravitational mirrors, where space-time was bent in dangerous ways. Blue lines showed what she called ghost lanes, hidden passages that didn't appear on standard scans but seemed safe based on the movement patterns of cosmic dust. "These routes," she said, pointing to the blue lines, "follow natural currents in the nebula. Ships could travel along them using much less fuel and with greater safety than the obvious paths." The room was quieter now, though Hannah could still hear scattered laughter and whispered comments about primitive human methods and Stone Age navigation. Commander Vextal stepped closer to examine the hand-drawn maps. His blue skin pulsed thoughtfully as he studied the careful notations and detailed observations. The drawings were remarkably thorough, showing aspects of the nebula that would require sophisticated analysis to detect. "Miss Lee," he said carefully, "your observations are certainly thorough. However, these are not scientific measurements. They are subjective interpretations based on visual observation." "Yes, sir," Hannah replied. "But visual observation was how humans navigated Earth's oceans for thousands of years. We learned to read patterns in wind and water that instruments couldn't always detect." Crix laughed out loud. "Commander, with respect, we are not navigating primitive Earth oceans. This is deep space. This is the Void Nebula, where ships disappear forever. We need precision, not human intuition." Many students nodded in agreement. The contrast between Hannah's simple pencil drawings and their sophisticated holographic displays was stark and embarrassing. An Andromedan student floated forward. "The humans' methods are historically interesting, but they lack quantitative accuracy. How can hand-drawn sketches compete with quantum sensors and gravitational wave detectors?" Commander Vextal continued studying Hannah's maps, his expression unreadable. The details were impressive for hand-drawn work, but they seemed impossibly primitive compared to the high-tech presentations that had come before. "Your effort is commendable, Miss Lee," he said finally. "However, modern navigation requires precision that only advanced instruments can provide. These maps, while showing obvious dedication, cannot match the accuracy of scientific measurement." Hannah nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She had expected this response, but it still hurt to see her weeks of careful work dismissed so easily. As she gathered her papers, she heard more whispers from the class. "I can't believe she thought that would work. Humans really aren't ready for galactic navigation." At least it was entertaining. Minho gave her a sympathetic look from across the room, but even he seemed embarrassed by her primitive presentation. Commander Vextal announced that final grades would be posted within a week. As students filed out of the presentation hall, most were already congratulating Crix on his obvious victory. His military-grade scanning equipment and sophisticated presentation had clearly set the standard for excellence. Hannah was the last to leave the hall. She walked slowly back to her dormitory, her notebook feeling heavier with each step. Around her, the space station hummed with acti. 6 months had passed since graduation day at the Galactic Navigation Academy. Hannah now worked as a junior navigation officer on cargo ships, running supplies between the outer colonies. Her final grade had been the lowest in the class, just barely passing. While her classmates received prestigious assignments with exploration fleets and diplomatic vessels, Hannah found herself checking fuel calculations for freight haulers. She didn't mind the work. The cargo ship captains were mostly practical beings who cared more about getting their goods delivered safely than about fancy navigation technology. They appreciated her careful attention to detail and her ability to find efficient routes through difficult space. On this particular morning, Hannah was reviewing shipping manifests in her small quarters when the ship's communication system crackled to life. Captain Yell Noth, a gruff but fair Rigelian, called all crew members to the main deck. "Emergency broadcast coming in from New Sol Station," the captain announced as the crew gathered around the central display. "Sounds serious," the screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Vextal, the former commander from the Navigation Academy. His blue skin was pulsing rapidly with what Hannah recognized as extreme stress among Altarians. All vessels in sectors 7 through 12. This is Admiral Vextal of the Galactic Navy. We have a code red emergency in the Void Nebula region. The luxury cruise ship Stellar Harmony is missing with 3,000 passengers and crew aboard. Hana felt her blood turn cold. 3,000 people. The Stellar Harmony was one of the largest passenger ships in the galaxy, carrying families on vacation trips between the core worlds and the outer colonies. The Admiral continued his broadcast. The ship's last transmission came from the outer edge of the Void Nebula 48 hours ago. Their AI navigation system reportedly malfunctioned during routine transit. We have lost all contact. Captain Yelnoth cursed in his native language. Every spacer knew the stories about the Void Nebula. Ships that entered the dangerous region without proper navigation rarely came out again. All available naval vessels are being dispatched for search and rescue operations, Admiral Vextal announced. Civilian ships are advised to maintain safe distance from the nebula region until further notice. The broadcast ended, leaving the cargo ship crew in stunned silence. 3,000 souls lost in one of the most dangerous regions of known space. Over the following days, news updates filled every communication channel. The story dominated galactic headlines as the largest rescue operation in recent history unfolded. Naval fleets from 6 different species converged on the Void Nebula, bringing the most advanced search and rescue equipment ever assembled. Hana followed the news broadcasts with growing dread. The first rescue attempt had been launched within 12 hours of the Stellar Harmony's disappearance. A squadron of Centaurian destroyers using military-grade navigation systems had entered the nebula following the most detailed maps available. The results were catastrophic. 2 of the destroyers had been caught in what the news reports called unexpected gravitational anomalies. The massive warships, each capable of destroying a planet, had been crushed like empty cans by gravitational forces that their instruments had failed to detect. Over 800 naval personnel were lost in the first rescue attempt alone. The second attempt came 24 hours later. Andromedan rescue vessels, equipped with quantum sensors and AI-assisted navigation, had tried a different approach. They followed routes mapped by their most advanced computers, paths that should have been completely safe according to all available data. Instead, they flew directly into dark matter storms that disabled their ship's systems. The rescue vessels barely escaped with their crews intact, their hulls blackened and their instruments destroyed by forces they never saw coming. A third attempt by Altarian ships met similar disaster. Their light-spectrum navigation, considered the most reliable method for mapping nebula regions, led them into electromagnetic fields that overloaded their systems and nearly killed everyone aboard. Hana watched the news reports from her quarters, her heart breaking with each failed rescue attempt. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, using technology worth more than entire star systems, could not navigate the Void Nebula safely. Captain Yelnoth found her staring at the latest news broadcast, which showed wreckage from the failed rescue ships drifting at the edge of the nebula. "Terrible business," the captain said, settling his large frame into a nearby chair. "In 40 years of space travel, I've never seen anything like this." "The ships are using the wrong routes," Hana said quietly. "What do you mean?" Hana turned from the screen to face her captain. "I studied the Void Nebula during navigation school. The routes they're taking look safe on instruments, but they're actually the most dangerous paths through the region." Captain Yelnoth raised one of his thick eyebrows. "You think you know better than Centaurian military computers and Andromedan AI systems?" "I think the computers are missing something," Hana replied. "The nebula has patterns that instruments can't detect. Natural currents and safe channels that only show up if you observe them directly." The captain studied her thoughtfully. He had worked with Hana for 6 months and had learned to respect her navigation instincts. She had found efficient routes through difficult regions that their ship's computer had missed entirely. "What would you do differently?" he asked. Hana pulled out her old leather notebook, the same one she had used during her academy presentation. She opened it to the pages showing her hand-drawn maps of the Void Nebula. "These routes," she said, pointing to the blue lines she had marked as ghost lanes. "They follow the natural currents in the nebula. Ships could travel along them safely, but they're invisible to standard scanning equipment." Captain Yelnoth examined the hand-drawn maps with growing interest. The sketches were detailed and careful, showing aspects of the nebula that he had never seen in official navigation charts. "Why didn't the rescue fleets use these routes?" he asked. "Because they don't know they exist," Hana replied sadly. "My maps were rejected at the academy. Everyone said hand-drawn navigation was primitive and useless." The news broadcast continued. In the background, showing Admiral Vextal addressing a gathering of military leaders from across the galaxy. The Admiral's skin was now pulsing so rapidly with stress that it appeared almost white. "The rescue operation has been suspended pending further analysis," the Admiral announced. "We cannot risk more lives until we develop a better understanding of the navigational hazards within the Void Nebula." The camera showed the faces of family members waiting for news of their loved ones aboard the Stellar Harmony. Children asked when their parents would come home. Elderly beings wept for their adult children lost in the cosmic maze. 3,000 people, Captain Yelnoth said quietly. "And the greatest minds in the galaxy can't figure out how to reach them." Hana stared at her hand-drawn maps, thinking about the safe harbors she had marked during her patient observations months ago. Small pockets within the nebula where ships could shelter from the worst gravitational forces and electromagnetic storms. "Captain," she said suddenly, "what if the Stellar Harmony found one of these safe areas?" She pointed to a region on her map marked with careful shading and tiny dots. Her notes described it as a calm zone, protected from stellar winds by surrounding gas formations. "If their navigation system failed here," she traced a path with her finger, "the natural currents would have carried them toward this area. It's like a harbor in a storm. They might still be alive." Captain Yelnoth looked from the map to Hana's earnest face. "You really believe your drawings show something that trillion-credit military scanners missed?" "I believe the scanners are looking for the wrong things," Hana replied. "They're designed to detect what we expect to find, not what's actually there." The news broadcast showed another update. A fourth rescue attempt had been planned, and then canceled when computer simulations showed it would likely result in even more casualties. The Void Nebula had become a graveyard of the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Admiral Vextal appeared on screen again, his exhaustion visible in the dim pulsing of his skin. "We are exploring all options," he said. "Every navigation expert, every computer system, every technological resource available is being dedicated to this rescue operation." Hana closed her notebook and made a decision that would change everything. "Captain," she said, "I need to contact Admiral Vextal." "What?" Captain Yelnoth stared at her in surprise. "You want to call the head of Galactic Navy Rescue Operations?" "Those people are going to die if someone doesn't try a different approach," Hana said. "I know it sounds crazy, but I think my maps might be able to help them." The captain was quiet for a long moment, studying her determined expression. Finally, he nodded slowly. "The communication equipment is on the bridge," he said. "But Hana, you understand this could end your career? If you're wrong, if this goes badly, you'll never work in space again." "If I'm right," Hana replied, 3,000 people might live." As they walked toward the bridge, neither of them knew that this moment would mark the beginning of a revolution in galactic navigation. The young woman with her hand-drawn maps was about to challenge the greatest technological minds in known space. Armed with nothing but pencil sketches and her grandfather's wisdom about reading the patterns in chaotic natural systems. The Void Nebula waited in the darkness, keeping its secrets and holding 3,000 lives in the balance. The command center of the Galactic Unity buzzed with urgent activity as Admiral Vextal prepared to launch the most important rescue mission in galactic history. The probe had confirmed what seemed impossible. Hana's hand-drawn maps were accurate. and the stellar harmony was alive in the heart of the Void Nebula. "Miss Lee," Admiral Vextal said, addressing Hana through the communication link, "we need you here immediately. Can your captain bring you to the flagship?" "Of course," Captain Yell Noth answered before Hana could speak. "We'll dock within 2 hours." The trip to the massive naval vessel felt like the longest journey of Hana's life. When she finally stepped aboard the Galactic Unity, she was overwhelmed by its size and sophistication. The corridors were filled with officers from dozens of different species, all moving with military precision. Admiral Vextal met her personally at the docking bay, accompanied by the same group of experts who had dismissed her maps just hours earlier. Their expressions had changed completely. Where once there had been mockery and dismissal, now there was curiosity and grudging respect. "Welcome aboard, Miss Lee," the Admiral said formally. "Your navigation data has proven more valuable than any of us imagined." They escorted her to the main command center, where her hand-drawn maps now occupied the central display screens. Seeing her simple pencil sketches surrounded by millions of credits worth of military technology felt surreal. "Before we proceed with the rescue operation," Admiral Vextal continued, "we need to understand how your methods work. Our greatest navigation experts have studied your maps, but they cannot explain how you detected patterns that our instruments missed entirely." A circle of alien scientists and military officers gathered around Hana. Their faces showed everything from fascination to barely concealed frustration. The Centaurian general who had laughed at her earlier now studied her with intense interest. "Please, explain your methodology," requested the Andromedan fleet commander, his tentacles weaving patterns of curiosity. Hana looked around at the assembled experts, feeling very small among these brilliant minds. But she thought of her grandfather's lessons and the 3,000 people depending on her knowledge. "I watched the nebula for over 60 hours during my academy project," she began. "Not through instruments, but with my own eyes using telescopes. I observed how the gas clouds moved, how light bent around different areas, and how cosmic dust flowed through the region. But our sensors can detect movements far too small for biological vision," interrupted the Rigelian strategist. "How could visual observation reveal anything our equipment missed?" "Because you're looking for the wrong things," Hana replied, gaining confidence. "Your instruments are designed to measure what you expect to find: gravitational fields, electromagnetic radiation, particle density, but they don't see patterns." She pointed to one of her drawings on the display. "This area here looks dangerous to your sensors because it shows high gravitational readings. But if you watch the way cosmic dust moves through it, you can see there's actually a safe corridor running right through the middle." The Altarian science officer floated closer to the display. "You're saying that visual observation of particle movements reveals structural information that direct measurement cannot detect?" "Exactly," Hana said. "It's like reading water currents on Earth's oceans. Experienced sailors could navigate by watching how waves moved and how foam patterns formed. They didn't need to measure the exact speed and direction of every drop of water." "But space is not an ocean," protested the Centaurian general. "The forces involved are completely different." Hana shook her head. "The principles are the same. Both are chaotic fluid systems with underlying patterns. My grandfather taught me that humans evolved to read these kinds of natural patterns. We survived on Earth by learning to predict weather, ocean currents, and animal migrations, just by observing subtle changes that our conscious minds couldn't even identify." Admiral Vextal's skin pulsed thoughtfully. "You're suggesting that human pattern recognition abilities can detect structural information in complex systems that instruments cannot measure directly?" "Yes," Hana replied. "Your computers are incredibly precise, but they analyze each measurement separately. Human brains automatically combine thousands of small observations into overall patterns. We see the forest instead of just the trees." She pointed to another section of her map. These ghost lanes I marked follow stellar wind corridors that provide natural protection from gravitational anomalies. The corridors exist because of how multiple force fields interact with each other over time. Your instruments can measure each force separately, but they don't see how they work together to create safe passages. The assembled experts exchanged glances. The explanation was both simple and revolutionary. They had been using the most sophisticated measurement devices in the galaxy to analyze individual components of the nebula, but missing the larger patterns that emerged from how those components interacted. "The safe harbors you marked," asked the Andromedan commander, "how did you identify those?" "By watching how the gas flows created calm zones," Hana explained. "Like eddies behind rocks in a river, the stellar winds and gravitational forces create turbulence in most areas, but in certain spots they cancel each other out and form pockets of stable space." "Remarkable," whispered the Altarian scientist. "Your species evolved cognitive abilities specifically adapted for reading chaotic natural systems." "Every species develops the abilities they need to survive," Hana said. "Altarians evolved to analyze light patterns because you lived near variable stars. Centaurians developed perfect memory because you needed to track resources across crystal caves. Humans learned to read chaotic patterns because we lived on a planet with unpredictable weather and dangerous oceans." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy had been defeated by a problem that required intuitive pattern recognition, exactly the kind of intelligence that humans had developed through millions of years of evolution. "Admiral," the communication officer announced, "the rescue fleet is ready to depart." Vexatal turned to Hana. "Miss Lee, we need you to guide our ships personally. Will you serve as navigation consultant for this rescue operation?" "Yes, sir," Hana replied without hesitation. The rescue fleet consisted of 12 ships, including medical vessels and emergency transports. Following Hana's exact route, they entered the Void Nebula with more confidence than any previous expedition. This time, instead of relying solely on instruments, each ship had human observers watching for the subtle patterns that revealed safe passage. The journey through the nebula took 6 hours. Hana sat in the flagship's navigation center, comparing her hand-drawn maps with real-time observations as they traveled deeper into the dangerous region. Her routes proved accurate at every turn, guiding the fleet safely through gravitational anomalies and electromagnetic storms that had destroyed previous rescue attempts. "There," Hana said finally, pointing ahead to where their sensors detected the stellar harmony's signal. "Just as I mapped it, a perfect safe harbor." The massive cruise ship came into view, sheltered in a calm pocket of space exactly where Hana's drawings had predicted. The ship was intact, its lights glowing warmly against the nebula's swirling darkness. 3,000 souls waited inside, alive and safe because a young human woman had learned to read the patterns in chaos. "Incredible," Admiral Vextal said, watching the rescue ships dock with the stranded cruise liner. "Miss Lee, you have revolutionized our understanding of navigation itself." As the passengers were safely transferred to the rescue vessels, news of the successful operation spread across the galaxy. The story of how ancient human navigation techniques had succeeded where the most advanced technology failed became the most important scientific discovery in centuries. The girl who had been ridiculed for her primitive methods had just changed the course of galactic civilization forever. 1 year after the Stellar Harmony rescue, the Galactic Navigation Institute looked very different. The austere halls that once echoed only with the hum of advanced computers now buzzed with a new kind of energy. Students from across the galaxy gathered around simple observation decks, learning to see space with their own eyes rather than relying solely on instruments. Professor Lee Hana stood before a mixed-species class in the Institute's newest lecture hall. At 24, she was the youngest professor in the Academy's history, but her students looked at her with genuine respect. Behind her, mounted in a place of honor, hung her original hand-drawn map of the Void Nebula, now considered one of the most important navigation documents ever created. "Today we will practice reading stellar wind patterns," she announced to her eager students. "Remember, your instruments can tell you what is happening at any single point, but your eyes and brain working together can show you the larger patterns that instruments miss." The class consisted of beings from 12 different species. There were Altarians who glowed softly as they concentrated, Centaurians whose crystal skin reflected the starlight, and even a few Andromedan students floating near the observation windows. Most surprising of all, there were now more human students than ever before, as other species recognized the unique value of human pattern recognition abilities. "Professor Hana," asked a young Rigelian student, "why didn't anyone discover these navigation methods before humans joined galactic civilization?" "Because every species develops the abilities they need most," Hana replied, walking to the large observation window that looked out into space. "Your species evolved in underground crystal caves, so you developed perfect memory for complex tunnel systems. That's incredibly valuable for certain types of navigation. But humans evolved on a planet with chaotic weather and dangerous oceans, so we learned to read patterns in natural systems." She pointed to the swirling nebula visible in the distance. "What you see as random gas movements, human eyes automatically process as wind patterns, current flows, and pressure systems. We don't even think about it consciously. It's just how our brains work." The success of the Stellar Harmony rescue had triggered a revolution in galactic navigation. Within months, every major space fleet had requested human navigation consultants. The old method of relying entirely on instruments was being replaced by a hybrid approach that combined technological precision with human intuitive analysis. "The most important discovery," Hana continued, "is that different types of intelligence are valuable in different situations. Advanced computers excel at precise measurement and calculation, but complex natural systems often require the kind of pattern recognition that biological brains do automatically." A Centaurian student raised one of his 4 arms. "Professor, my government wants to know if other human abilities might be useful for space exploration. Are there other areas where human instincts could help?" Hana smiled. This question came up frequently now that humanity's unique contributions were recognized. Humans are particularly good at reading social patterns and predicting behavior in chaotic situations. Some exploration fleets are already using human consultants to help understand alien cultures and negotiate in complex diplomatic situations. She walked over to her desk and picked up a data pad showing recent exploration reports. Last month, a human anthropologist helped prevent a war between 2 alien species by recognizing cultural patterns that both sides had missed. The week before that, human traders identified economic opportunities in a chaotic market that AI systems couldn't predict. "It's amazing," said an Altarian student, her skin pulsing with excitement. "For centuries, we assumed that more advanced technology always meant better results. But you've shown us that different problems require different types of intelligence." The transformation extended far beyond navigation. Universities across the galaxy were establishing new programs in biological intelligence studies and intuitive analysis methods. What had once been dismissed as primitive human superstition was now recognized as a sophisticated form of information processing that complemented technological analysis. Park Min-ho, now captain of his own exploration vessel, often visited the academy to guest lecture on practical applications of human navigation techniques. His ship, the Earth Current, had become famous for discovering new worlds by following routes that conventional navigation computers said were impossible. "The key," Min-ho told Hana's current class during one of his visits, "is learning to trust your instincts while still respecting what instruments can tell you. Professor Hana taught us that the best navigation combines human intuition with alien technology. The economic impact had been enormous. Trade routes that followed human-identified patterns were proving safer and more efficient than traditional paths. Exploration missions guided by human pattern recognition were discovering new worlds and resources at unprecedented rates. Several alien governments had established immigration programs specifically to attract human navigators and analysts. But perhaps the most significant change was in how different species viewed each other. The old assumption that technological advancement automatically meant superiority had been shattered. Now there was growing recognition that each species brought unique intellectual gifts to galactic civilization. "We're seeing the emergence of truly collaborative intelligence," Hana explained to a gathering of interspecies scientists. "Andromedan quantum processing combined with Altarian light analysis and human pattern recognition creates capabilities that none of us could achieve alone." Admiral Vextail, now promoted to head of Galactic Navigation Command, often referenced the Stellar Harmony Rescue in his speeches about military cooperation. "The greatest lesson," he would say, "is that pride and prejudice nearly cost us 3,000 lives. When we finally listened to a human perspective that we had previously dismissed, we discovered capabilities we never knew existed, the void." Nebula itself had become a symbol of this new collaborative approach. Once considered impassable, it was now a major shipping route. Cargo vessels followed the ghost lanes that Hana had first mapped with pencil and paper, while passenger ships sheltered in the safe harbors she had identified through careful observation. Standing in her classroom, watching students from across the galaxy learn to see space through human eyes, Hana often thought about her grandfather Kim Jun. His ancient wisdom about reading natural patterns had become the foundation for a new era of galactic exploration. "Professor," a young human student asked after class, "do you ever regret not using standard technology for your original academy project?" Hana looked at the girl's earnest face and smiled. "Never. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from approaching old problems in completely new ways. Or in our case, approaching new problems with very old wisdom." As evening fell over the academy, Hana remained at the observation deck, watching the stars and thinking about humanity's place among them. A year ago, humans had been considered a minor species with primitive methods. Now they were recognized as essential partners in galactic civilization. The greatest irony, she reflected, was that humanity's supposedly backward nature had turned out to be their greatest strength. While other species had evolved beyond the need to read natural patterns, humans had retained and refined these abilities through millions of years of surviving in chaotic environments. "The universe is vast and full of patterns," she said quietly, to herself, repeating something her grandfather had once told her. "The key is learning how to see them." Her student Minho, now decorated as one of the galaxy's finest navigators, often ended his own lectures with words that had become a motto for the new generation of explorers. "Sometimes the most advanced technology is an ancient mind that knows how to read the wind." The transformation was complete. Humanity had found its place among the stars not by becoming more like other species, but by remaining uniquely human. The girl who had been mocked for her hand-drawn maps had revolutionized galactic civilization by proving that different kinds of intelligence were not just valuable, but essential. In classrooms across the galaxy, students now learned that the most important navigation tool was not any instrument or computer, but the ability to see patterns in chaos, a gift that humans had carried with them from the dangerous oceans of Earth to the infinite cosmos beyond. The stars themselves had become humanity's ocean, and finally, the galaxy understood that humans were born to sail among them.